Hello, friends. This is Confessions with Amy. Here we share new confessions every day.
They say your children are your legacy. But what if your legacy tries to bury you alive? My name is Eloise Hartley. I'm 65 years old. And my only son, Camden, left me to die by the side of a desolate Wyoming road, 3 days after we buried my husband. Not metaphorically. Literally. He pulled over near an abandoned trailhead off Route 287, tossed my suitcase out like it was trash, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "This is where you get out. The house and the business are mine now." Then he drove away. No hesitation. No guilt. Just dust. I stood there, my feet sinking into gravel, my breath catching in my throat. The wind sliced through my sweater, and the taste of betrayal coated my mouth like ash. And still, I didn't cry. Camden had always been a complicated boy. Sharp. Charming. Dangerous in the way broken things can be when they learn to smile just right. People loved him. My husband, Richard, adored him, blinded by paternal pride even when warning signs blinked like neon. The DUI at 21. The gambling. The quiet disappearances. I forgave. I covered. I even took out a second mortgage to pay off his debt to someone I never met. When Richard got sick last winter, Camden came back around. He played the doting son, driving his father to chemo, cooking us dinner, even fixing the old porch swing that had been broken for years. I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd changed. But snakes don't change. They shed their skin and slither closer. The funeral was held at St. Meredith's Chapel in Laramie. A small, white-steepled church that Richard loved. He had planned everything, the readings, the songs, the flowers. Camden gave a eulogy. It was beautiful. He cried. He made everyone else cry. I remember thinking, he's finally become the man his father hoped he'd be. How stupid that was. 2 days later, Camden offered to take me on a healing drive into the country. "Just us," he said. "You need space to breathe, Mom." He brought coffee and played Dad's old Willie Nelson CD in the car. We laughed. He asked about my childhood. He even apologized for being distant the last few years. It wasn't until we turned off the paved road that I started to worry. It wasn't until he pulled over that I knew. I asked him why. He didn't answer. He didn't yell. He didn't explain. He just smiled, tight-lipped and cold, and told me that the will had been changed. That everything was his now. That I was, just in the way. What he didn't know, what he never bothered to check, was that Richard had made me the sole owner of our property, our business, our accounts, everything. He'd done it quietly, just weeks before the end. He'd seen through the performance. He'd wanted to protect me. Camden didn't get a dime. But I didn't tell him that. Not yet. Let him think he'd won. I stood on that roadside for nearly 40 minutes before a rancher named Clive pulled over in a mud-covered Ford. He didn't ask too many questions. Just gave me a thermos of sweet tea and drove me back to town. He said I looked like a woman who'd survived worse than a bad road. He was right. That day, I stopped being afraid. I didn't go home. I didn't call Camden. I booked a small room at a roadside inn in Rawlins and sat in silence for 2 days. And then I made a list. A plan. Because you don't walk away from someone like me and think there won't be consequences. I didn't need revenge. Not at first. What I needed was air. Silence. A place to remember who I was before I became someone's mother, someone's wife, before my entire life was spent pouring myself into other people's cups while mine stayed empty. In that little motel room in Rawlins, with its squeaky fan and scratchy sheets, I sat cross-legged on the bed and stared at the ceiling for hours. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was emptied. Burned down to embers. But even embers can start fires. Camden didn't know about the lawyer. About the meetings. About the long nights Richard and I spent going over documents while he coughed blood into a linen napkin so he wouldn't frighten me. My husband had run Hartley and Finch Custom Furniture for 37 years. It was his pride, his obsession. He built it from a single lathe and a broken-down barn outside Saratoga. By the end, our company sold handcrafted furniture to high-end interior designers across 3 states. And it was mine now. He'd signed the final transfer of ownership 3 weeks before his death, sitting upright in bed, wearing a clean flannel shirt, looking me in the eyes and saying, "Camden's blood, but you're the soul. Don't let him take what he hasn't earned." That line stayed with me. He hadn't earned any of it. But he thought he had. 3 days after Camden left me on that road, I drove back to our home in Centennial. It was early morning when I pulled into the driveway. The house looked the same, but the windows felt wrong, like they were watching me instead of welcoming me. His truck was gone. I walked through the front door and was met with silence. No note. No apology. But things were moved. My favorite photos were gone from the mantel. The cushions had been changed. A box of liquor I never bought sat on the kitchen counter. He'd tried to settle in like a king in a castle he thought he'd conquered. I smiled. He'd had no idea the deed was in my name. That the business had been quietly handed to me months ago. That the lawyer he called the old fossil was my most loyal ally. He'd tried to play a long con. But the game had ended before it began. I spent the morning undoing him. First, I changed the locks. Then I walked into the home office and took the company laptop out of the safe. It took me 3 minutes to lock him out of every company account, email, payroll, order systems. I called our accountant, Jeanette, and told her Camden was no longer authorized to sign, review, or discuss anything. Jeanette sighed and said, "Took you long enough." Apparently, Camden had already tried to sell 3 antique pieces from the workshop and move $20,000 from the business account. The system froze the transaction because he lacked admin privileges. He thought he was the spider. He didn't see the web. Later that evening, I made myself tea in my favorite mug, the one with a little bear on it that said "Mama knows best." I took it out of the back of the cabinet, where he must have shoved it. It was then that the doorbell rang. I didn't expect anyone. But part of me knew. I opened the door to find him standing there, hands in his coat pockets, a crooked, sheepish smile on his face. His expression was pure performance, somewhere between "sorry, Mom," and "you should be grateful I came back." "Hey," he said. I guess I overreacted. I looked at him. Really looked. He was thinner. Pale. Eyes darting like he'd been up for nights. "Can we talk?" he added. "I think we just had miscommunication." Miscommunication? Is that what you call it when you dump your mother like roadside garbage and try to rob her blind? I didn't say a word. Just looked him in the eye. I waited until his smile faltered. Then I said, "This isn't your house." I closed the door. And I locked it. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I didn't let him in. Because the thing about dignity is, once you reclaim it, you never give it back. The next morning, he came back. I saw his truck through the blinds. Same dent in the side, same Wyoming plates with the expired registration sticker. He parked halfway down the driveway this time, like he was trying not to scare me. Too late for that. I didn't answer the door. I didn't need to. He knocked once. Then again. Then he started yelling. "Mom! You can't just lock me out like this. You don't understand what's going on. We're family." Family. That word used to mean something. Now it tasted like rust. He stayed out there for 15 minutes, pacing, cursing under his breath. I let him talk. I let him wear himself out. Eventually, the truck door slammed, and he peeled out of the driveway like a child denied dessert. After that, I knew it wouldn't be the end. Men like Camden don't walk away from power they thought they owned. So I prepared. I wasn't just someone's wife anymore. I was the owner of Hartley and Finch, and that meant I had responsibilities, to my workers, to our legacy, to myself. The next morning, I drove to the workshop for the first time since Richard's passing. It sat at the edge of the valley, 2 stories tall, cedar walls weathered by years of mountain wind. Inside, the scent of sawdust and pine was still thick. The machinery hummed under the fingers of the men and women who'd worked with us for decades. When I walked in, everything stopped. It was May, one of our finishers, who spoke first. He told us you were stepping down. I almost laughed. Instead, I looked her in the eye and said, "He lied. I'm here now. And I'm not going anywhere." Camden had tried to slide in like an heir to a throne. He'd scheduled meetings, pitched ideas, talked about rebranding. He had no vision, just greed and a deep, ugly hunger to be someone. But he didn't know craft. He didn't know design. He didn't know what it meant to create something from nothing. That's what we did at Hartley and Finch. We built things that lasted. I called an all-hands meeting in the main hall. 32 employees stood around me, silent, waiting. Some were scared. Some curious. I told them the truth. I told them Camden had no claim. That Richard had entrusted the company to me. That I was taking back control, not for revenge, but to restore order. And then I said the part they needed to hear most. Your jobs are safe. Your paychecks will clear. We're going to keep building. But we're doing it my way. They applauded. That night, I sat at Richard's old drafting table. His notes still covered the walls, sketches of coffee tables, rocking chairs, carvings inspired by Native American patterns he studied for years. I ran my fingers over the oak grain and whispered, "I'm doing it, love. I'm doing what you asked." A storm rolled in around midnight. Thunder cracked over the mountains, and wind howled against the shutters. It felt like cleansing. And then, right after midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown caller. I didn't answer. But I listened to the voicemail. Camden's voice, low and sharp. "You think this is over, but it's not. You're confused. You're emotional. You don't understand what you're doing. You need to call me. Before you ruin everything." There it was. Not worry. Not regret. Control. That same voice he used when he was 10 and broke the neighbor's window. The same tone he used when I bailed him out of jail. Like I was always the problem for not smoothing it over. But I wasn't smoothing anymore. I deleted the voicemail and blocked the number. Let him chase ghosts. What Camden didn't know was this. I had time. I had clarity. And most importantly, I had everything he thought he stole. But he still hadn't learned. The more I ignored him, the more dangerous he became. I've heard it said that some men only want what they can't have. That the moment you take your power back, they come running, not out of love, but out of panic. Camden wasn't mourning me. He was mourning control. Over the next 2 weeks, the silence didn't last. It twisted. Shifted. Took on new shapes. He sent emails from different accounts. He showed up at the workshop once, parking across the road and watching the crew from inside his truck like some sad outlaw. He even sent flowers to the house. No note, just a gaudy bouquet of red roses. Cheap ones. Gas station kind. A woman knows the difference. I threw them straight into the trash. Then came the letter. An actual handwritten letter, delivered to the workshop in a manila envelope with no return address. I recognized his handwriting immediately, slanted, sharp, dramatic. He'd always liked how it looked on paper. Said it made him look like someone who mattered. I didn't want to read it. But I did. It was long. Rambling. a mix of apology and manipulation. He said he was in a dark place when he left me on that road. That he was scared. That he didn't mean to hurt me. That he was just trying to take care of what he thought was his. But beneath every word was the same poison he always used. Guilt. He said I owed him. That he gave up everything to come home and help Richard. That I should have understood what he did. He signed it, your son, the one who still loves you. I sat there for a long time. Then I struck a match and burned the letter in the old steel bin behind the shop. Let the wind carry his lies somewhere else. But things didn't end there. He filed a petition with the local probate court, trying to contest the will. Claimed undue influence. Said I manipulated his dying father into changing the documents. Said Richard wasn't of sound mind. He dug up medical records, found some junior lawyer in Cheyenne willing to bite, and tried to drag me through the mud in court. I remember sitting in the judge's chambers, watching Camden's lawyer fumble through a pile of documents like a man searching for meaning in ashes. I didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Because I had the truth. And I had Richard's signature, dated, notarized, witnessed, filed 6 months before his death. Clear-headed. Decisive. He'd left it all to me not out of spite. But because he knew. The judge dismissed Camden's petition before it made it to trial. Called it frivolous and opportunistic. Camden wasn't in the courtroom that day. Cowards rarely are. I expected to feel triumph. What I felt was peace. He was exhausting. A shadow always tugging at the edge of my peace. Now he was just noise behind a closed door. I went home, made tea, and sat by the fireplace in silence. The quiet didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like mine. And then, finally, he stopped. No more calls. No more letters. He vanished like a ghost who finally realized no one was listening to his haunting. But I didn't trust it. Because Camden didn't know how to lose. Not gracefully. Not permanently. And men like that? They don't fade. They fester. I didn't hear from him for 73 days. I counted. Not out of hope, no, that had died the moment his truck vanished down that gravel road, but out of instinct. Mothers count. It's what we do. Steps. Cries. Mistakes. Days since the last damage. I'd begun to believe maybe he'd finally let go. That maybe life, or karma, or plain old exhaustion had caught up to him. I was wrong. It happened on a Wednesday. I was in the shop going over payroll when May came in from the front, pale and stiff. There's someone in the showroom, she said. Asking for you. I knew before I saw him. He looked worse than before, gaunt, unshaven, wearing a frayed leather jacket he probably hadn't taken off in days. But he still had that expression, that thing, a half-smirk, half-glare, like the world owed him an apology for not kneeling faster. Hey, Mom, he said, hands in his pockets. Like we were just running into each other at a grocery store. I didn't answer. He looked around the showroom, at the polished cherrywood credenzas and custom rocking chairs, and said, "Place looks good. You did all right." I almost laughed. I did all right? I'd held this business together through illness, grief, and betrayal. He'd contributed nothing but invoices for damage control. Then came the real reason he was there. "I've been thinking," he said, "maybe we should talk. About, maybe me coming back into the company. I know I went too far, but I was grieving, you know. We both were. And I think Dad would want us to." "Don't," I interrupted. My voice was calm. Too calm. "Don't stand in the middle of what your father built and speak for him." He blinked. "Off balance. You can't still be angry." I set the papers in my hand down carefully. Looked him in the eyes. "I'm not angry, Camden. I'm finished." He stepped forward, that flicker of desperation rising like heat off summer asphalt. I made mistakes, okay? I lost it after Dad died. You don't know what that did to me. No, I said. You lost your opportunity. That's not grief, Camden. That's consequence. He tried again. Pleading. Bargaining. Offered to start at the bottom of the company. Rebuild trust. Said we could write a new chapter. It might have worked on a different mother. The kind who forgets. The kind who forgives everything. But not me. I remembered everything. The gravel under my shoes. The sound of his tires spinning away. The scent of my own fear in the cold wind. He'd left me to die. That doesn't get a second chapter. Before he could speak again, I calmly reached into the filing cabinet behind the showroom desk and pulled out a white envelope. Inside was a notarized cease and desist order I'd had drawn up after the court case. Just in case. I held it out to him. You're not welcome here. You're not part of this company. You're not part of this home. You will not contact me again. He didn't take it. So I dropped it on the floor at his feet. His eyes flicked down to it. Something changed in his face then, not rage, not even sadness. Defeat. For the first time, Camden Hartley saw the truth. I was never coming back. He didn't yell. Didn't threaten. He just turned, walked to the door, and paused one last time. You think you're so strong, he said. I met his gaze without blinking. No, Camden. I know I am. And then he left. Just like that. No slamming. No fight. Just silence. The kind that follows when something finally dies. That was the last time I saw my son. It hurt. Of course it did. Even poison still came from my own body once. But some things, some people, you have to survive. And I had. I had survived. The first thing I did after Camden left for good was change the curtains. It sounds silly, I know. But they'd been his favorite, thick beige drapes, heavy and dark, the kind that made the whole house feel like it was trying to disappear. He always said they made the living room look expensive. I tore them down with both hands. The light came flooding in like it had been waiting for years. Dust danced in the air like little memories. And I realized. I didn't even remember what color the walls were. That's what happens, you know. When you live for other people too long. You forget your own favorite things. I started finding myself in small ways. A turquoise kettle for the kitchen. A soft teal paint for the bathroom. An old record player from a consignment shop in Laramie. I played Ella Fitzgerald while I cleaned out the closets. Found boxes of things I'd kept not because I loved them, but because they were his. Richard's suits. Camden's childhood trophies. Receipts from trips we never took because someone always needed me to stay home. I kept a few things. Love doesn't vanish just because it ends. But the rest? I let go. Each donation box I packed felt like bricks lifting off my chest. The workshop flourished. We started offering custom commissions online. A young couple from Oregon ordered a 12-foot black walnut dining table that took our whole team 6 weeks to build, and when it shipped, I cried. Not because of the sale. But because I remembered how proud Richard used to look when a piece left the floor. I started mentoring young women in woodworking, something I never thought I'd do. One girl, Nadine, came in with hands that shook every time she touched a chisel. By month 3, she was carving detail work that made even the oldest craftsman stop and stare. You believed in me before I did, she told me once. It nearly broke me. Because for the first time in 65 years, I believed in myself. I took long drives into the mountains. Alone. No one waiting for me. No one asking where I was or when I'd be back. Just me, the wind, and the freedom I didn't know I was allowed to want. I sat on cliffs and read books I never had time for. Ate sandwiches with my bare hands like a kid on a field trip. I laughed. Out loud. No one heard it but the trees. It felt like being reborn. Not younger, but realer. Sometimes, at night, I thought of Camden. Not with anger. Not with sorrow either. Just stillness. A kind of quiet that comes when you stop trying to rescue someone who won't stop swimming away. I didn't hate him. But I didn't miss him. That, I think, was the hardest truth of all. One morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about him in weeks. And I smiled. That was the day I booked a cruise to Alaska. I'd never seen a glacier. Never felt the ocean that far north. Richard and I always said, someday. Well, someday was now. I had money. I had health. And most importantly, I had no one to answer to. So I packed a bag, closed the shop for a week, and went. Just me. Eloise Hartley. Not Mom. Not Mrs. Hartley. Not the woman left behind. Just me. And you know what? I was more than enough. Alaska was vast. Standing on the deck of that ship, wrapped in layers of fleece and windbreaker, I saw mountains that looked like they had never been touched by human hands. The sky was so wide it made me feel small, but not invisible. For the first time, small felt sacred. Like I belonged to something bigger than pain. There were glaciers that cracked and groaned, pieces falling off like time shedding its weight. And in a strange way, I felt the same. Like I was finally letting go of years that no longer belonged to me. I made friends on that cruise. Real ones. There was a woman named Bernice, 74, traveling solo after a divorce from a man she'd spent 50 years making excuses for. And Harold, a retired pilot who now painted watercolors and told terrible jokes over breakfast. We played cards. We drank wine. We laughed like teenagers. No one asked about my past. They just saw me. And I realized. I'd been waiting my whole life for that. When I returned to Wyoming, everything felt quieter. Not empty, just simpler. The shop was running smoothly. May had handled orders while I was gone, and Nadine had finished a commission all by herself. Pride swelled in my chest, not just for them, but for what I'd built. Without a man beside me. Without a son to carry my name. Just me and the work of my hands. One day, about a month after I returned, a letter came. No return address. But I recognized the handwriting. His. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I walked it outside and burned it in the fire pit behind the shop, just like the first one. The wind carried the ashes west, and I whispered, not bitter, just final. I don't need to read your regrets. I lived through the original. Camden hasn't contacted me since. People ask if I've forgiven him. My answer's always the same. Forgiveness isn't something you hand out like a casserole at a funeral. It's something you live in, if you're lucky. And I'm living just fine without him. The women I mentor sometimes ask if I ever wish things were different. If I wish my son had stayed good. If I'd done something, anything, wrong. And I tell them this. I did everything I could. But sometimes the people we love choose who they are, and it has nothing to do with us. Then I tell them the rest. He tried to bury me. He didn't realize I was a seed. These days, I sleep with the windows open. I eat when I'm hungry. I read until I fall asleep with the lights still on. I talk to Richard in the mornings, out loud, while the coffee brews. And I laugh. A lot. My life is smaller than it was, and yet somehow, so much bigger. Sometimes, women in town whisper that I cut off my own son. They say it like I should feel shame. But I don't. I feel peace. And peace is not something I'll ever apologize for. Not again. Not ever. There's a kind of power in walking through your house and hearing nothing but your own footsteps. Not silence, exactly, because silence can be hollow. But solitude. Wholeness. The quiet of a life lived on your own terms. It took me 65 years to get here. And I didn't arrive gently. But I arrived. Last week, I received an invitation in the mail. A wedding. His wedding. Camden's. I stared at the envelope for a long time. White cardstock, heavy with pretension, embossed letters in silver foil. It didn't say, Mom. It said, Ms. Eloise Hartley. A stranger's name in my own handwriting. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel anger. What I felt was something I didn't expect. Relief. Because that invitation was not a gesture of healing. It was a test. Would I come back, smile for pictures, pretend nothing happened? Would I hand him the ribbon-wrapped box of forgiveness just so he could unwrap it in front of an audience? He wanted me to play the role. The mother who endures. The mother who always shows up. But I've retired from performance. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. The silence was my answer. Instead, I spent that weekend in a little cabin 2 hours north. Just me, a fishing pole I barely knew how to use, and a dog I'd adopted from a shelter named Cricket. He's half collie, half chaos, and all heart. We made a fire, drank coffee by the lake, and watched the stars. And I thought. This is it. Not the revenge. Not the courtroom wins. Not the sweet refusal of invitations. The real victory is this. I built a life that no one can take from me. No son, no man, no memory. Sometimes I pass by families in town. Mothers with grown children. Grandkids. Holidays. Smiles that look easy. I don't envy them. Because I've learned that family isn't just blood. It's not even loyalty. It's love that doesn't demand your silence to survive. And I have that now. With friends. With myself. With the people I choose. People used to tell me, you must miss him. And maybe, once, I did. But not anymore. Now, when I think of Camden, I think of that road. The one where he left me. And I smile. Because that was the day I was set free. Eloise Hartley, 65 years old. Mother. Widow. Survivor. And finally. Her own woman.